Hey there, and welcome to the Foodscaper Podcast, where we dig deep into the growing world of foodscaping, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Matt Lebon, and on each episode, we are unearthing the stories of those who have turned their passion for growing food and nurturing ecological landscapes into thriving professions. From seasoned pros to fresh faces in the industry, we'll chat with the innovators and trailblazers who are transforming how we think about food production and landscape design. Whether you're contemplating a career in foodscaping or you're already knee-deep in garden soil, our guests will share their insights, experiences, and inspirations to help you cultivate your own path.
Like if the soil's not clean and the soil's not healthy, that carrot that you're eating is not going to be clean and healthy either, and neither is your body.
Get ready to dig into some rich conversations. Let's get growing. A big thanks to our podcast sponsors, Epic Gardening and Stark Brothers Nursery. Thank you both. I am delighted to be talking with Leslie Bennett of Pine House Edible Gardens. She's joining us from the Bay Area. Thank you so much for being with us, Leslie.
Hi, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk with you all.
I've been a fan for a long time.
Love to hear it.
Beautiful images come across my radar over the years. I feel like you all have been operating at this elite level of foodscaping since I learned about this work and came into it myself. And so it's such an honor to be able to chat with you. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you're operating, and we'll get started there.
Sure. Thank you for all of that. I appreciate it. It's been a 15-year journey now. Lots to share about. I'm based in Oakland, California, and I've been in Oakland, California for 15 years, running my business, Pine House Edible Gardens, a design, build, and maintenance company working all around the Bay Area. So I don't even know how many, I can't even keep track of it anymore because I've been, but something we have 40 or 50 like maintenance client accounts. So we'll probably do about 12 to 15 garden installs a year, one per month, more or less, depending on the size of them. Some things.
How many people are on the Pine House Edible Gardens team?
Depending on how I count it, and actual employees. I have an office manager, and she is crucial. So crucial. So we have an office manager, then there's 3 designers plus myself, and then a 4th designer who's a hybrid veggie garden designer, maintenance program manager, and as of January, lifestyle and content person. All business owners have to be content creators too. That's 2024. And then we've got 7, it fluctuates a little bit seasonally, but between 7 and 9 gardeners. And then we have our subcontractor who's worked with us for 15 years and has his own crew of 7 guys. And they're definitely not employees of ours, but they work for Pine House projects 95% of the year. So it's a big family. It's a big crew, and the team is like the best part about Pine House. I'm so proud of the group of people that I've been able to bring together and the range of skill sets. I'm sure you have a sense of this. There's no book that will teach you how to do it. Now there is a book, but there are books. You can take classes. What I have found is that the best way to get beautiful work done is to bring a lot of different people with different skill sets and expertise together and operate as a hive mind to create really beautiful, edible, integrated gardens that include ornamentals, edibles, healing plants, and culturally meaningful plants, all the different things that matter. I can't hold all of that myself. I don't think any one person could. The team is key to the complexity of the work that we do.
Yeah, I resonate with so many things already that you're talking about. The idea of getting to work together with people that lift you up and inspire you was such a huge part of what I was aiming for when I got started. I don't want to do this alone. Like the hive mind, as you said, it's just so life-giving. And
Wow.
I also wanted to draw attention to the word integrated that you said, because I'm fascinated with integrative medicine and this idea that we don't just have to have the medical model. We can have the herbal model and chiropractic and acupuncture in this integrated approach. And I think it speaks to what is an incredible diversity of plants that you use. When I'm looking through your book and preparing for this interview, I'm like, they use everything. The flowers, the veggie garden, the fruits, it's an astounding amount of diversity. And it's to talk about that in an integrative approach. I love it.
Yeah, great. I totally agree. I think that's a huge part of my approach. You don't have to throw out Western medicine. You can actually work with it and Eastern medicine or herbal medicine or whatever it is. You can do all the different things. I think it's the same with gardens and garden design. I think so much of my learning about gardening, I just encountered my biggest pet peeve, which is judgmentalism. Like people being so judgmental, narrow-minded, like it has to be all native or all edible or all low water. It has to be all like whatever the heck it is. And I'm just like, no, it doesn't. And even traditional ornamental landscaping, which has such a bad rap in so many ways, like the lawns and the roses and the daylilies, refuse to reject them. I think there is a role for them. I think there is some value, and it's just adjusting them, tweaking them so that they're actually adaptive and speaking to the human experience that we're working with. But yeah, that's a big part of how I approach things.
Yeah, and I think it's such an important approach to reaching a mass audience, which you've clearly successfully done, like meeting our culture where it's at right now.
I'm sure you also feel this a lot of the time. I love my team, and I'm so glad that I work with a team. And I was going to say, working on my own, it's just not fun. As a business owner, I feel like I often am operating in my own little silo, and it's very isolating, and I don't get to talk about things that only a fellow edible landscape business owner would know about. You just touched on something that was such a part of Pine House's origins. I just had to say it was a vision of mine when I started Pine House 15 years ago. I just remember I was like, I really want to make this appealing for everybody. My goal was whole food. Yes, we can poke some holes in it. Yes, there's problems with it. Yes, now Jeff Bezos owns it and it's even worse. But I remember thinking of the natural food stores of the 1970s with bad lighting and mung beans. You had to be pretty committed to be holistic or natural to want to go into that store. And I thought it was so brilliant the way Whole Foods took the organic food and made it really beautiful and appealing with great lighting. It's a great experience. There's a million ways to criticize Whole Foods, which I'm fully aware of. The Oakland store is full of everyone in town. It's a very diverse shopping experience that's very pleasurable and pleasant. And I remember thinking, oh, this is what I want edible landscaping to be like. I don't want this to be some sacrifice. I don't want there to be straw all over the place. I want this to be what everybody wants because it feels good. It's aspirational and within reach. That was very much my goal, to meet the mainstream, meet people where they're at, and make people want it. And you do that by making it beautiful, because that's what a lot of people respond to. So anyways, so I'll just, and I think Whole Foods with its problems, one small thing they've done or one large thing they've done is like convert a lot of commercial farmland to organic or more organic growing approaches. And I think same here. There's a lot of, I can criticize a lot of my work and other people's work too. It's still very fossil fuel intensive. It's still a lot of problematic things. But I think at the very least, I've converted a lot of square footage, people's backyards, to organic practices. We're gardening organically. These people may not have cared about that at all, but they do want a beautiful Pine House garden that makes their life awesome. And that still excites me. You can tell I'm like, whoa, I love this. But that's my approach and how I market. I'm trying to get people on board.
Yeah. And one theme that seems to be running through the podcast this season,
Yep.
Let us not forget the medicine that is the landscape and the spiritual nourishment that comes from being around all these plants. And of course,
Yep.
all of the harvesting of the food that is the most nutritious, the most fresh, all the medicine that is coming in its highest form. Those benefits are so undeniable to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And like just making more people interested in signing up for it. So that can only be a good thing. Yes to that.
I love thinking about in 20 years, what all the kids of the Foodscapes that we install when they're adults, how is their worldview going to be affected by having grown up in these environments?
Yeah, and I look at that with my kids every day in the garden. I love that. And my little 5-year-old, I didn't even think she liked gardening. My 9-year-old loves gardening, and he's out in the garden all the time and identifies as such. My little one wasn't so interested, but she loves watermelon. And this year we're growing a watermelon. It's her watermelon. She's super psyched about it. Every visitor that comes over, we show the watermelon off. Oakland does not have the warm enough climate for watermelons. But, and so some visitor came over just recently and she showed, she's like, I love gardening. I was like, look at you. You're right. And let alone that, she has such a relationship with all the plants in our garden. And I think, that's going to change her worldview so much.
Yep. Okay, so let's back up and learn a little bit more about how you got here. One of the parts of your history that I learned about is this whole time of woofing, and you left a career and pivoted. And tell us that story of leaving a career and pivoting through woofing.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a fun story, and I'll try not to drag it out too long, but it is one of my favorite things to share because so many people want to find a different way to live. So many people want to find a way to have a life with gardens of some sorts or a business with gardens. And my story felt very unexpected to me. It still feels unexpected to me. So I like to share it to be like, this can happen. So I'm born and raised in the Bay Area. I grew up in Palo Alto, totally traditional suburban middle class life. Always really like good in school. And I ended up going to Harvard for college and studied environmental science and public policy. I was always really interested in, like in high school, I started the environmental club. At Harvard, I was the recycling coordinator. I was like, well, I got to save the world somehow. Earth Day was a big deal for me. That was definitely my direction. I decided to go to law school after college because that's what smart girls from the suburbs do. I'm also a daughter of immigrants, and my parents definitely pushed a pretty strong success story. Like, they were not raising me to become a gardener. I was going to be a professional of some sort. I went to law school and decided to focus my work on land use law, which I loved. That gave me a lot of insights on people's relationship to land and how public policy legislation can affect the way that we all live with land. I hated law school a whole lot, but I did get a lot out of that training, including confidence. If I went to Harvard, if I went to law school, passed the bar exam, if I can do that, I can start a gardening company. Although I did not really do anything with my legal degree, I'm really glad it gave me the confidence to take a bold step for myself. I hated law school so much, I left a year early to do a joint degree, an LLM, which is a master's of law, in studying cultural property, which is around landscapes and landscape protection law and how landscapes sort of impact people's lives. I spent like 27 years really getting pretty intense academic training around environmentalism, environmental justice, and landscape, thinking about landscapes a lot, but from a super academic perspective. I took an internship at the USDA's Foreign Agricultural Office in London when I was living there for that year. My job was writing about European agricultural laws and how they affect the landscape. And I was talking with farmers on the phone in Southwest England or wherever. And I remember I was talking with this lady, this farmer woman. She was like, have you ever been to a farm? Do you know what you're talking about at all? And I was like, no, I haven't. I know nothing. And I realized I was one of those policy wonks that knew nothing and was writing useless papers with very little information. And so that kind of piqued my interest, and I realized that I wanted to learn more. And so she invited me out to her farm. I actually don't think I ever made it there. I started woofing on the weekends. I was working at my law firm by that time. I was depressed. I hated being there. It was extremely racist, sexist, capitalist. I was feeling really sad. And I just decided to, I think at that point I was just following my nose. I was like, what do I want to do? And I found woofing, which for the way I started was literally just going out to little homesteads out not too far from London, just the green belt, spending a weekend at someone's homestead, weeding the asparagus patch or cutting rhubarb. It was a simple, humble beginnings, but I liked it. I did it a bunch of times. And then when it was time for me to leave my law firm, I also was like, what am I going to do? I owe a cajillion dollars going on. And I went and did a permaculture course. And I spent a 2-week permaculture course at a mushroom and apple orchard in Herefordshire. Learned all the things you learn in a permaculture course. And I had a critical ear to it then. I still have a critical ear to it. But there was a lot that I really loved. And it was a turning point for me where I was like, oh, this systems view makes sense to me and I love it. More than anything, I noticed that I was really happy thinking about these things, doing these things with my hands on this farm. This is what I want to do. I think I was at a stage where I was like, I've done everything I was supposed to do and it's not working for me. So let me try something else. From there, I had the idea to start a business like Pine House Edible Gardens. I thought, if I'm a depressed corporate lawyer finding great joy on a apple mushroom farm in Herefordshire, there are other people like me. That's the heart of a business is like, I feel like I've heard people say this about a house. If you're looking for a house to buy, find a house that you love and trust that like if it spark something in you, it will spark something in somebody else. Like you'll be able to resell it. And that spark is really important. And so I had that same thing with this. I was like, oh, this is sparking great, meaningful joy in me. That means it will spark a similar feeling in someone else. I have something that I can share with them and that they'll pay for because they'll want to learn it. So I had a very clear vision that I wanted to start a business sharing what I'd learned, helping people like myself, people who are maybe stuck in their version of modern life, like stuck at a desk. I worked so much as a corporate lawyer, always at my desk, eating sandwiches at my desk for lunch and ordering food for dinner. I just felt so divorced from natural life. I really wanted to be more connected to nature and to what I considered to be real life. So anyway, that's where I had the business idea, which honestly hasn't changed that much since then. It was a very crystal clear vision of this thing doing so much for me and I can share it with others. I want to meet people where they are. Not everybody is a crunchy farmer who's ready to do all the right environmentalist things. If you're just a normal suburban person or a corporate lawyer and you're not doing anything right in your life, I'm here to meet you. I'm here to not judge you. I'm here to start you on your road to being in better connection with the land and food that you live with. So from there, I left London. I moved to Jamaica. It was winter in London. I was depressed. So it made a lot of sense to go. Also, my family is Jamaican. My mom is English. My dad's Jamaican. And I had always wanted to develop a better connection with my ancestral roots in Jamaica. A lot of my work and my journey becoming a gardener, becoming a food grower, becoming a landscape designer is very much steeped in reconnecting with my ancestral roots. And people on both sides of my lineage, white and black, tropical, non-tropical, everybody on both sides of my family grew up in touch with the land, growing food. I spent like 8 months in Jamaica volunteering on a permaculture farm. I found one permaculture garden that I volunteered at, another organic farm up in the mountains that was run by this German, he called himself a Jamaican. He was a German guy who lived in Jamaica for a long time, and he brought biodynamic knowledge with him and set up a farm on top of the mountain where it's cool and misty. And he was growing gourmet greens for the fancy hotels on the island. And so I started out with him, and it was an all local crew, growing arugula, mizuna, basil, working with a machete, planting, tilling, harvesting all with the machete, and really simple kind of wood structures. And that's how I learned to farm. That was my first introduction, and I loved it. I was in heaven up there. It was completely random. What am I doing? But I loved it. I was like, this is for me. And I eventually decided it was time to leave Jamaica, and I moved to Nevada City. I moved to Mendocino, worked on a biodynamic farm for a bit. Then I moved to Nevada City, worked on an organic farm, lived in a trailer in the woods, did all the things. I was in my deep hippie life. And that was about 3 years that this kind of journey of apprenticing in Jamaica and Northern California went on for. I was thinking deeply about life and learning about how to grow food. And very fortunately, I ended up meeting a guy, his name was Patrick Rodesil, and he was amazing up in Nevada City, who was a garden designer and florist who had turned to farming and was running a small CSA and also doing edible landscaping in the Nevada City area. I attached myself to him and was like, hey, will you be my mentor? Can I hang out with you and learn everything? And he very kindly did and taught me a whole lot. And we ended up starting a first version of my business together. He taught me a lot about basic stuff. I can't even remember, but like the very basic things of like putting in a landscape. This is what you do. And then we came to Oakland and kept going from there. I think the main thing is I really didn't know that much when I started here in Oakland with Pine House Edible Gardens. I did have a mentor, but I started from scratch with some farming knowledge and a clear vision of what I wanted to share with the world. And I've just kept trying and trialing. It's so much trial and error. 15 years of trial and error to get to a point where I do know a lot now. I am able to create beautiful gardens, and I have this amazing team that has taught me so much, and I'm able to do the work that I do. Hopefully you follow.
I'm tracking very much.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And I think it's a great story because it's so many of us a non-traditional one. We all have these interesting stories because it's literally the only way to arrive in this profession in a roundabout way. The thing that I'm super fascinated by is translating farming skills and some of the experiences you had into landscape design and being able to deliver a plan to a client that is attached to a budget. And it's so different than like rows of arugula and Mizuna. And it's a vastly different world. It's so much more plant diverse. It requires a greater knowledge of plant life over time, seasonality. How do you bridge that gap? How do you become a gardener farmer and then translate that into landscape designer?
Yeah, great question. One of the farms that I worked on in Nevada City was owned by a farmer, and his wife was a landscape designer. So that farm was the first time that I saw like growing food and landscape design blended together. And it was a really beautiful farm. It was the same as every other farm, but it was a really beautifully laid out farm with a center and pathways that guided you to places. I chose specifically to go there because I identified, how do I make this jump? How do I learn these things? And that was really inspiring to me. I think just seeing it and living it, I was only at that farm for a month or two, but I saw design really impact the experience of growing food. Aside from that, I took some landscape design classes, community college classes. I learned how to make a plan. I learned ornamental and native plant ID and maybe pests and diseases class. I did probably 2 semesters of classes, like 4 classes in all. Not much, but enough just learning how to make a sketch. Somebody's got to teach you that. Aside from that, I've hired people who know more than me. I have learned how to design gardens from the landscape architects that I have hired and the landscape designers that I have hired. And I've worked with, and I'm always boggled at how siloed everybody's education is. The landscape architects and landscape designers are so skilled in creating space, rendering images, doing all these things, and they know nothing about plants. The landscape architects and designers who've chosen to work with me are renegades in their own field because they're like, I signed up for this because I like plants. It turns out like they're only required to take 1 or 2 plant classes to get a landscape architecture degree. So they're super pros on Hardscape. They know all of the drainage, all the things needed to create really complex landscape architectural drawings, but actually very little plant knowledge. And then you have plant designers who are usually have taken maybe plant design stuff, maybe know a lot more about plants, but don't know much about the technical drainage, hardscape stuff. And then you have farmers, people who know how to grow food, and that's its own thing. My initial staff was a very small team, but it was a landscape architect who made her own bold move of leaving away, and her name's Holly Koljan, and she now co-leads my firm with me. But she had made a bold move from a non-plant-based design life into wanting to learn about residential garden designs and growing food, but she knew nothing about growing food. I had pretty good knowledge about growing vegetables. I had some exposure about growing fruit trees and berries and things. I had big ideas, lots of visions. And then one of the other women who worked with us, she had been a garden designer her name's Lana Lopez. And she had had her own small business in New York City and she knew tons about cutting flowers and arranging flowers. And so for a long time, her and then another woman, Jessica, on my team, and some other folks who were either farmers, like people who had apprenticed on gardens and knew how to grow food and just wanted to learn more. I think we all came with like our limited expertise. We all had a lot of expertise, but it was limited to one zone. I was the food person. I knew how to grow food, but I knew how I wanted food to be integrated in the landscape. And we would work on things together. It was a lot of really collaborative work of, okay, we have this backyard. How do we want to do it? And the landscape architect's like, okay, let's think about the programming. How are we going to orient the space? And then I'd be like, we need to put the sun-loving fruit trees in these spots, and we need the veggie beds here. And then which flowers are happening in which season? Let's get those worked in. And then what are we going to weave it all together with? And that's often ornamental plants. And we all hold a lot more information. Like I know a lot about spatial layout now, and I also know a lot about cutting flowers. I know a ton about growing food. But at the beginning, a lot of close work together, brainstorming and being like, how can we meld these things? Because it's not something we were making it up as we went along. So yeah, I have learned so much from the people I've chosen to hire and work with.
Yeah. That seems like a great strategy for staying nourished when you have to make decisions. And as the business owner,
Yeah.
you can be
Yeah.
like, you know what? Actually, more about this than me. So what you say goes here.
I think it was a scary decision to make as a business owner. We have this idea of, oh, well, I have to be the one in charge. I have to be the expert on everything. If they know more than me, they're going to try to take over, like this or that. I don't know. There's just like things that can be scary, I think, about hiring anybody. What helped me a lot was having confidence in my vision and going ahead and hiring the people I needed to do the best job possible.
So do you have any stories or moments that feel really noteworthy from that growth period of your business when you were like, either, wow, I'm really onto something, like things are taking off, or maybe the opposite, where you were like, oh, shoot, this is some quicksand?
I think in general, the idea of creating beautiful, edible, and now I've layered on this idea of creating meaningful landscapes as well. Or just beautiful. I did Beautiful Edible Garden. That was my first book, Beautiful Edible Garden. That concept, pretty quickly, I was like, oh, people want this. Granted, it was 2000 in the Bay Area when there was like the slow food revolution and like it was a ripe moment to start this business. But it still itself as I am a gardener, but I'm not selling gardening services. I'm not even selling garden designs. I am selling a lifestyle. This is a lifestyle I'm selling. And it's a lifestyle I believe in. I'm not selling something I don't believe in. People want a better life. And if there's a clear path to have a better life where you're going out and picking fresh strawberries with your kids and touching the sun-warmed tomatoes, life is good. I got pretty clear pretty fast that this was something people want. On the over my head part, I would still say Hardscape. It's just hard and scary and expensive. But I have an amazing stonemason, my contractor. He's an amazing builder who knows way more than I do about anything. We give him directions, and Holly and I have given him directions, and then be like, wow, we just had him build a $20,000 wall that doesn't look good. I've had to make the decision as the business owner, we're going to rebuild it out of our pocket because I am very much I believe in doing really excellent work, and I'm only interested in doing excellent work, which is a bit of an affliction sometimes, but I can stand by everything I've done, and that helps a lot, and it does help grow the business over time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's expensive.
Hopefully, being in the Bay Area, you get access to clientele where you can buffer that a little bit.
Definitely. That's come over time. Absolutely.
So speaking of creating those meaningful changes in people's lives, would love to talk about Black Sanctuary Gardens, which I heard about and read about in your book. It's a very inspiring part of your story.
I'll try to give you a concise version of it, but as I was doing edible landscape work and really what I was aiming for, because remember, I had all those law school loans to pay off. So I was not ever trying to set up a small business that paid me pennies. I need to make some money, pay off these loans, and be a functional human in the Bay Area where it's not cheap. So what I do is high-end private residential design. I have always geared myself toward that and aimed toward that. It has been increasingly distressing to me that all of my clients were wealthy, mostly white, people who could afford my services. That was fine because that's how I set it up. But it was a conflict that I was holding of, okay, like how do I exist within capitalism and make enough money to have a reasonable living for myself? And also knowing that I was not put on this planet to dedicate my entire life to serving wealthy white people. I was holding with that sort of my takeaway from my corporate law days of evil corporate lawyers are humans too, and they also are struggling and need some support. Not to equate white people with evil corporate lawyers, but white people with all their privileges and history and all the ways that our society supports them, they're humans too, and they also need support, and I want to meet them where they are. It was never like, oh, I don't want to serve wealthy white people. In fact, I know that many of my clients need the connection to land and earth too. So I wanted to meet them, and I wanted to meet people who were not wealthy and white and find a way to do that. And that was a conflict I held for a long time. How do I fix this? It felt, I'm sure a lot of people, when you're doing sort of luxury work, whether you're selling luxury jewelry or flowers or like whatever, it feels like you're selling to the people who have excess money, and that's just how it is. And it is just how it is. I eventually came up with, and I really, it was due to modeling. Like other people showed me the way, which is why I like to talk about this. There was a Black artist, Tunde, I can't remember his last name, somewhere in the South, but he was a artist chef who I think had the same conflict. He was working in fancy restaurants, and he set up a restaurant, like a pop-up cafe that had 2 menus with like different prices. And there was one price for white people, and then there was another, like the same menu, but with like different prices for everybody else. And the prices for white people were higher, reflecting all the structural privilege and capital they hold. And I was like, that's cool. That's appropriate. It's okay to actually name the truth. As landscapers, we see, I always feel like, wow, I'm like traversing the literal American landscape of inequality. People are living vastly different lives, and we see it. And for me, it's painful to see, wow, this is so much that some people have and so little that others have. And I really want everybody to have this beautiful life of frolicking in their garden. Anyways, so I think this artist Tunde gave me this concept of maybe we can just be a little more upfront about this and say, hey, we're talking about what we're seeing out here. And then I came up with, I don't even know how I connected the dots, but long story short, I decided to tell my clients, hey, I want to be able to support, I was going to say I'm in a Black women's group, and my Black women's group has a lot of amazing radical leaders who have modeled for me that it's okay to prioritize Black women. There's a woman who said to me, my priority in life is supporting Black women and putting them first and helping them because we deserve it. I needed to hear that, and I needed to be like, oh, that's an okay thing. It absolutely resonated with me, and I took that on of, oh, it's okay for me to say I'm going to support Black women and orient my life business to supporting Black women. Those are 2 tidbits that came together, and over the course of a couple of years, I was able to come up with my equity pricing framework for my business and the Black Sanctuary Gardens project. The Black Sanctuary Gardens project is a series of gardens created in collaboration with Black women in and around the Oakland area. So we have 8 gardens now. They are no cost to low cost gardens funded by my business, Pine House Edible Gardens. And in 2019, we started and we said we'd commit to doing 1 low to no cost garden a year to create a garden with a Black woman in Oakland. And the way that we would get the funds is that we'd apply an equity contribution fee to all of our standard projects. It's an optional equity contribution calculated between 1% and 4% of every design and install contract that I do. For sometimes it's $39, and sometimes it's $4,000, or sometimes it's more. Every piece of work we do, we adjust it because some clients have more wiggle room, some have less. So it all adds up. We put it in a separate account and add it up, and eventually we've got $20,000 or $30,000, and it's okay. We're ready for our next garden. Let's do it. And we find, usually I have Black women who have reached out to me and let me know they're interested. I assess for really like simple projects. Landscaping's super expensive, especially if you're doing any earth moving or terracing. So we focus on small, flat lots in Oakland that can be transformed, like a full transformation for around $20K or $30K. And we always ask for financial mutuality, ask the women participants to put some money in, and that can range from like $500 to $10,000. Like we're meeting them where they are. And some Black Sanctuary Garden projects are entirely self-funded. Like they've got plenty of money and they just want to be part of the project. So it's not, the Black Sanctuary Gardens project is not really a financial project. It's, I guess I would say, another thing that became clear to me is what I want to do in the world. I love making these gardens. They're beautiful and amazing and incredible. And that's something I'm really happy to make and share and have a legacy of teaching and creating. But what else do I think the world needs? And I was like, I think we need more Black women in these gardens. And I was like, I also just really want to see them. I don't see enough of this. Media is not giving me these images. If the world needs anything, I decided the world needs more Black women in gardens and pictures of them. And I decided to include an artistic element into the Black Sanctuary Gardens project where we make the gardens And obviously the Black woman would live with them. And then we'd include a portrait where we take a portrait of each woman in the gardens. I'm one of the Black Sanctuary Garden participants as well. So we each have our beautiful garden portrait, where it's like a room of one's own, a feminist, a Black intersectional take on a room of one's own. And I think that's what the world needs, more of that. So yeah, so that's the project, is how my business supports it.
Yeah.
And I've really loved doing it. It's been as much a gift for me as for anybody else involved with the project. It's been really helpful. It was a scary move to make for my business too. When you invest in a Pine House garden, you are investing in the Black Sanctuary Gardens project and improving access to gardens. It's all on my website, but that felt a little scary. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get people to sign up for this, but it has actually helped me to define my tribe and who my clients are, who have the money to spend with me and also want to spend it with me because they have the same values that I do.
Wow.
So a lot of running a business is that. It's like, what are you all about? What are you selling? Your brand is your values, and getting super clear about what you value. It took me 10 years, but I got super clear that what I value is Black women and gardens, and together, that's what we're about.
I'm cheering you on. I love it. I'm inspired.
Thank you.
Just hearing you say that feels so much more approachable to do something like that than when I just have it in my head. Oh, our clients will pay a few extra percentages to go towards other projects for those who can't afford it. And we just maybe 2 years ago in our business started actually taking a debit out of our checking account and putting it into savings, which we should have been doing a long time ago. It's so fascinating how it builds up over time. You don't notice it. And you wake up a year later and you're like, holy cow, you've got a chunk of change.
Exactly.
And so it does feel accessible, but thinking about it in the long game, you're not doing this every week. You're not a nonprofit. You're making a meaningful impact, but it's not taking over your business.
Yeah, it's a very small but meaningful part of our business. I choose projects that it's one garden a year, and I make sure that they take 1 or 2 weeks to complete because I'm not making money while I'm doing them.
Yeah.
So over the course of 6 years, we've been able to make 8 gardens and photograph them. And we're having a big event next month to reveal the portraits. It's thrilling. It's life-changing for myself, for all the women, and I think for the world.
Calling all edible landscapers, the Foodscaper Conference is back for its 4th annual event happening this February 12th and 13th. When we started the conference, we wanted to create this meeting of the minds for our community, a place to connect and learn like other industries. This year, we're adding workshop-style presentations where you'll interact with experts and engage in breakout sessions to discuss your biggest questions. It's an opportunity to grow, share, and connect. Plus, you get 10% off with the code PODCAST at checkout. Sign up now at thefoodscaper.com. One of the things I want to talk about is some of the design principles you bring up. Those are just a part of your Black Sanctuary Gardens, but I feel like it's incredibly relevant to talk about design principles. The ones that you have in this book, I love because as a gardener farmer, I had to do this landscape design thing. And I think now you can look back and be like, what is happening at that table with my landscape designer and my landscape architect when I'm advocating for things and they're advocating for things? What is actually influencing our opinions? And I think that comes out in the form of some principles that ultimately are dictating that conversation. So there's a few that stuck out to me that I would love for you to comment on.
Yeah, great. It was so interesting writing the book, and I wanted to capture the work that we'd done. And I was like, what are we doing? What's happening here? Because we do have a formula. We do approach spaces in certain ways. It was a fascinating intellectual exercise to come up with them, and I'm glad they make sense.
They do make sense. The two that stuck out to me are make space for connection and fortify your sense of belonging. So talk to us about make space for connection.
Make space for connection is really what I started with. I grew up in Palo Alto, California, surrounded by these golden hills of California. My mom was my Girl Scout troop leader. We hiked a lot. I grew up feeling very connected to the landscape that I lived with. I just loved the way it looked. And it still matters to me when I'm driving on the highway. I'm like, oh, California, these golden hills or green hills, whatever time of year it is. I grew up feeling very connected to my landscape, and eventually I really wanted to get a more hands-on connection with the land. I think that healthy identity, healthy collective identity, and that's a lot of what I was working about within England, and like that the impact of agricultural policy and the way landscape look and how it affects our collective identity. Americans are proud of our national park system. It's part of what makes us American. I want people to have a localized version of that. This is my yard. I shaped it. I grew it. Or these things are here and I've developed a relationship with it. I want that connection with the land to happen for everybody. And I feel like food is this really easy way to, I think, for people to realize the thing I've always wanted them to know of, like, you got to take care of the soil. We got to take care of this planet. It is us and we are it. And I feel like growing food is this really clear thing of, like, if the soil's not clean and the soil's not healthy, that carrot that you're eating is not going to be clean and healthy easy either, and neither is your body. And it's this very direct circle where so I think growing food is like the primary way to be connected and to make space for connection. You're connecting with the land, and then you end up with this harvest or this abundance of flowers or fruits or vegetables, which you have to share. And that is a blessing. You get to figure out ways to share it. And that is a connecting moment. And then I think one of the things I love about edible foods and flowers, the ones that you cut for arranging, is that they don't exist without you. A lot of perennial food crops can't exist without humans. But these annual food crops have been bred over the years to cohabitate with humans. They require us to do the things so that they keep living. And I think it's this beautiful mutual relationship that crucially involves you. And so I think when you're out there tending to your plants or tending to yourself, like they go hand in hand. So anyway, I think that's it. Hopefully that follows. Growing food, I think, is this very powerful way to make space for connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
I'll just say one other thing, which is a lot of food growers, and I think foodscapers and a lot of the people I learned from were super focused on growing food in backyards or edible landscaping for the sake of the food. They're like, let's get self-sufficient. Let's grow all this food. And I was like, I don't really care about the food, actually. I like a homegrown tomato as much as anybody else. And I like food and it matters. But I'm actually not growing food for food. I'm growing food for connection. That takes me away from like also being able to meet people where they are. I think if you just have one pot with a couple herbs or just one thing, that's enough. Or you can have 20 beds or a whole backyard farm. They all are yielding the same thing, which is this connection.
I want to skip ahead to talk about some of the other design things there. Basic, but so key. For me, these have been aha moments in my journey. I love your commentary on them. One of them is creating visual balance in the space, which you talk about. And the other one is foliage contrast, which you all are masters of.
Thank you.
Nothing comes through more clearly to me in these images that you have mastered use of foliage to contrast and not just needing height and flowering time, but the actual foliage of the plant. So tell us about that role and the importance of those factors for budding landscape designers.
Yeah, I think the balancing a visual weight. I've always loved interior design too. And that was my way backup plan. If I dropped out of law school, I was like, I'll become either a florist or an interior designer. And now I'm like both, but outside. I think of a living room. You got to have a couch, a chair, a table, and they need to balance each other. They can't all be crammed in one corner. They need to be visually pleasing. I've always been very visually attuned. The way a space looks or feels really affects my mood. So I think as a little kid, I rearranged my bedroom on a weekly basis. I just liked that. It's the same thing I was doing as a 13-year-old in my pink bedroom. I was just moving the pink things around. I'm doing the same thing in the garden. The big things need to balance each other, and that's probably all I need to say about it. But I think it's super important to a space feeling good and being visually pleasing. And then
one thing I did love was your section on triangulation when it comes to balance and thinking about if there is a big element in one part of the garden, then it needs another triangulated element to give it balance.
Yeah, honestly, I joke sometimes. I'm like, that's my entire design method. It's that triangulation. I use it for everything. I laugh at myself, but it's what they teach you in design school. Graphic designers use it. Garden designers use it. Everybody uses it because it's true. I triangulate hardscape. I triangulate furniture, all the large elements, trees. I even triangulate lettuce starts in a veggie bed because it makes everything look better. And of course, there's exceptions. And sometimes you want to mix it up and work in some formal symmetry or do other things. But it's a really helpful tool. If you start paying attention to that, it makes a huge difference in terms of a garden looking more, what is the word? Like the magic just happened. You don't notice why it looks or feels so good, but that's the reason why things are triangulated.
Okay. And then how about foliage contrast? How did you get into this? Do you have a theory about it? How have you elevated it so much? And just
Well,
curious.
that's a funny question. I'm obsessed with foliage contrast, which shows. And at this point, everyone on my team, we've all worked together so long. So a lot of the designers are really working independently, creating their gardens. I review and collaborate on everything, but a lot of time I'm reviewing for foliage contrast. I'm like, do we have enough? Why are these two similarly leafed plants next to each other? Let's add something else in.
Break it down, Leslie, like what, for those who maybe they are coming from like growing the rows of arugula and mizuna and want to get into edible landscaping, what is foliage contrast all about?
I actually started in veggie beds. I was like, how am I going to make this veggie bed beautiful? Okay, I've got some big leafy bok choys or collard greens. What am I going to place next to them? I'm going to put some feathery carrot tops or fennel, right? And I'm going to get feathery. I'm going to get broad green leaf. Then I'm going to have some spiky onion tops. And then I'm going to do a burgundy. I started out laying out veggie beds, focusing on foliage contrast. I would place my burgundies in a triangle. Then I'd place my spikies, like alliums. Then I would do the fuzzies, the fennels, the carrots, the little soft texture guys. And then I'd work in my leafy greens. I taught myself. I did not invent foliage contrast. It's a well-known garden design thing, but I invented it for myself in veggie beds, working with vegetables and just trying to make these vegetable gardens be productive and food producing, of course, but like, how can I make these really beautiful? And then I started taking that outside of the veggie beds into the landscape and being like, okay, I'm not working with red mizuna and purple kale and shiso. I'm now working with a red Japanese maple and a burgundy loropetalum and a red leucodendron. I'm going to triangulate those in my landscape and then find the feathery textures and then the spikies and then the leafy greens. And in the landscape, as in the veggie bed, there's too many leafy greens, too many round leaves and too many small fine leaves. So finding the contrast, everything pops and it looks a lot better. Maybe that helps.
Yeah, I think it is a really important concept for us to grab when we are approaching this edible landscaping thing. It makes me think of what are the most two common perennials that I plant every week, which is bronze fennel and like Welsh onions, a perennial scallion that makes those beautiful flowers and stands upright in the landscape. Those two just really help to contrast so many of the traditional leafy plants, whether that leafy plant could be like a rudbeckia for us, mixes in beautifully.
Yeah.
Thanks for highlighting that for us. And obviously people check out your book and see how that actually looks. And I truly do love the book. Another thing that I really loved about it is you didn't skimp on identifying plants in the pictures. Like, we're going to go the extra mile and make sure we have identified everything that people are looking at here so that the plant geeks can be like, oh, I wish I lived in California to invest. But also so that they can identify all of the great work that you've done with varying foliage and stuff like that.
I'm so glad that was well received. And I have to shout out my co-author, Julie Chai, who was the garden editor at Sunset Magazine and had such a strong editorial background of how-to gardens. She was like, we got to include these plant names and we got to do it in a clear way. She led on that and bless her heart, she did the most amazing job. And I think it's of such huge value because that's what we all want to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thanks.
There's these design tips sections on Black Sanctuary Gardens. You outline all of these case studies, so highlight projects which I think is so important for Foodscaper inspiration. What do you
Yeah.
feel most proud of from the book?
I feel most proud of from the book is two things. One is that I found my authentic voice, which is a really big deal for us all. This is my second book. My first book is great, but I was younger. I wasn't entirely sure of myself. It was not my authentic voice. And 15 years later, I'm just like, wow, this is what I have to say. I'm like, fine to say it. And I'm just proud of myself for doing so much personal growth and getting to the point where I said what I said. I'm really proud to have been able to produce a book that is diverse, that includes people of a wide range of races. It's diverse in other ways as well, but the racial element stands out most to me. Yeah. It took me a long time to decide to write a second book. The last thing the world needs is another book full of white people frolicking in their gardens. We have enough of that. We need to see everyone else, and including white people. And that took 15 years of intentional business use. These gardens all existed, and the Black Sanctuary Gardens are incorporated alongside all the other gardens in the book. And I'm really proud to have been able to create a business and a repertoire of work that is inclusive and diverse, and to have been able to show that off really beautifully in the book.
Yeah, it is really beautiful. And it is really strikes a chord with me, and I'm sure with so many other people, because I think we come to this work with a lot of idealistic values. It's okay, how do we actually live our values here? And I think hopefully it will also just inspire a lot of other people of all races to step into this work. Obviously, the more images that we show of just diversity.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think most people in this line of work come with so much idealism. And life is hard. Running a business is hard. Making things align is really hard. I've struggled with it, and I know I don't have all the answers. I've come up with some answers, and I'm glad to share them. I hope that other foodscapers, edible landscapers, garden designers, just as I was inspired by the models that other people did for me, I hope that I'm able to model some of this and affect some change or some confidence to do things differently.
Yeah. So I want to end our time with that inspiration word, because you, as I mentioned, are a huge inspiration to me, and the work of your gardens has really set the bar for what I'm aiming for. But what is inspiring Leslie Bennett? Where do you go for inspiration?
No, the answer always the plant. I am so inspired by the plants themselves, and I'm bowled over that I've been doing this for 15 years. I am not bored. There's some parts that I'm like, ugh, it's time to invoice again. But the plants, I'm like a small child. I'm so excited. I'm either my gardener, some people from my team will send me photos, or just this morning, I was saying before I got on this call, Holly and Anna from my design team, we were in my driveway doing a container layout and putting we were like, oh my God, the Adenanthus, it's so pretty. I was like, this is fun, guys. This is ridiculous. It was like, how many heads does it take to turn on a light bulb? Really focusing on this. But it was really fun. I really have a lot of fun and derive a lot of joy from getting to know plants, appreciating their beauty, learning how they live and grow, just being in a relationship with them. That's my inspiration, and I think it's going to keep on going. I don't know where it'll take me, but as long as I'm with the plants, I will be inspired.
There's never-ending inspiration in the plants.
That keeps me going, for sure. I don't know where I'm going next exactly, but we'll see.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share all this today, Leslie. I'm sure that people are going to be inspired to want to learn more about Pine House, to check out your 2 books. And obviously there's this recent one, Garden Wonderland. I love
Garden Wonderland. It is.
Yeah, the Wonderland. It's just like instilling that magic. You said the word frolicking a lot, which is just so perfect. If you're frolicking, you are liberated and free.
I mean, that is my goal. A liberated life for all in connection with plants and nature in the garden. So thank you so much for reading the book and loving it. Please tell everybody, and everybody you can get the book on Amazon or bookshop.org. But I really appreciate your support.
If this podcast inspired you or taught you something new, it would mean so much if you could give us 30 seconds of your time, follow or subscribe to the Foodscaper Podcast. And while you're there, if you could give us a 5-star review or rating, that would be so greatly appreciated. These small acts help us grow the foodscaping movement. Thank you for listening to the Foodscaper Podcast. Keep growing. Big thanks to our official fruit tree nursery sponsor, Stark Brothers, for supporting today's episode. Stark Brothers offers a survival guarantee on their plants for the first year, and my company, Custom Foodscaping, relies on them every year to source quality fruit-bearing plants. Shop at starkbros.com. Big thanks to our official garden supply sponsor, Epic Gardening, for supporting today's episode. Epic Gardening is one of our top recommended sites for edible landscaping, education, and garden supplies. Check out Epic Gardening at shop.epicgardening.com.